I've really enjoyed Mushoku Tensei for its themes of family, community, and second chances. I think that those themes are what gave the story of Rudius Grey Rat. It gave the story a heart. It provided a lot of emotion that sort of hooked me to it. And that was one of the main conflicts or main struggles that Rudius had in his life before he was reincarnated, and something that changed in his life after being reincarnated. You can see the contrast between both lives, and you can see a vast improvement and overall a happier ending for Rudius. The main story of Mushoku Tensei, it follows the story of Rudius Grey Rat and his life, his second life, in a new world after being reincarnated from his old one. In his old one, he went through a lot. He went through a lot of trauma. He went through the results of his own bad decisions, and he holed himself up in his parents' home, and eventually was kicked out of his home. And in that part of the story, you can see a lot of the effects of the trauma, which was the bullying that he went through. And it got pretty bad, and he lost a lot of self-esteem, self-confidence, and he began to hate the world and everyone in it. And eventually, after some bad decisions, particularly with his niece, and pushing his parents and his siblings away and his friends, those who were trying to help him, he began to hate himself. And eventually, after being homeless for a bit, around the age of 30, he notices that there are a group of kids who aren't really paying attention there in conversation, and they're crossing a street, and Truck-kun is making his rounds, and he saves one of the kids, and he dies eventually and is reincarnated into another world. And in this world is his second chance, essentially, but he doesn't see it that way initially. It's over time that he gradually comes to this realization that I can do things right this time around. And it's not like something that is explicitly said, but it's done through actions and changes in mindset. In the beginning, it's more of like, I didn't die, that sort of adrenaline excitement, that good feeling. I still get to live a new life, and I'm born into a well-off family, and cool, I have magical powers and stuff like that. And over time, you get to see Rudius begin to take his first steps towards a better life. And like I said before, he doesn't initially see it that way, but you get to see him change from that shut-in to that homeless person, that mindset of the world hates me and I hate the world, to Rudius beginning to learn and push boundaries by, getting used to his home, getting used to his family, getting used to his backyard, and eventually, and this is something that I really like, that the the anime focused on is the moving beyond the boundary of the gate to his home, and his teacher and his future second wife, Roxy Migurdia, helped him take those steps outside, and that for me is, and I started off as an anime only, that for me is what made me see the story as something genuine in comparison to the other isekai that I've seen that have come after this story. And as some of you may know, that Mushoku Tensei is one of the first isekai in stories, and you can see the tropes and the cliches that other isekais have been inspired by, sought to replicate in their stories. That theme of going out and exploring the world, meeting the world, and changing his mindset about the outside in comparison to himself, because his life prior, before he died, was full of fear, was full of anger, resentment, all these negative emotions, and that realization of I'm alive, I'm actually alive in a different world, and I have all these positive things. It's that rebound from that negative pit, that negative emotional pit that he was in before. And now, after some time, after that rush of adrenaline, there's a word I'm searching for that I can't dopamine, there you go, that's the word. That rush of dopamine, things start to settle down and reality starts to set in, that even though this is a world full of magic and dragons and elves and dwarves and demons, and you're born in this rich family, this well-off family, that there are still some dangers in this world, and there's still that reality that begins to set in. And this happens over time after his first adventure, after the displacement incident, after he grew up in his home town and met all these people who are important foundation to his life in this world. And you get to see these people later on, and they have, these early days are the roots, the foundation of things to come, both good and bad. And he grows, and he meets Sophie, he meets Ghislaine, he meets Eris, he meets the other side of his Borat family, the Grey Rat family, excuse me. As a viewer and as a reader, you're introduced to this side of the story, and you get to see all the nobles, and you get to see how medieval fantasy like this world is, and for me, and that's the world building that I enjoy, the type of world that I enjoy. And then from then on, the displacement incident, and then he is stranded in the demon continent with Eris, and he meets Rudyard, and they go on their adventures, and there's that Rudius, you can tell that Rudius doesn't really notice it right away, but because he's on the high of the power that he has, the good fortune that he has in this side of his life. And I mean, from his perspective, this second chance is going very well, and you can relate to that, you can empathize with that mindset. But you do know that this world may be even more dangerous than the one he was in prior. with all the magic and the displacement incident and the demons and the dragons and the other creatures that are unknown, and the man god eventually, and the dragon god, and the 7 Greek powers. The ceiling of powers is just as daunting, or if not even more, than his prior life. Continuing on, Rudius grows and he builds those relationships, and he eventually meets his Aunt Teresa, and he makes it back to he meets up with his father and his sister, who he hasn't seen since her birth, and he finds out the severity of the situation through his father, and there's a conflict there, and they're able to work it out, and that was a lot of that pattern of realism is something that I enjoyed in the story. That the conflicts in the family, the internal conflicts, like when Paul cheated on Zenith with Lilia, how that conflict was more or less resolved satisfactory, but it was able to be moved past, and they became a family again, and it just became a bigger family. And in this incident, he had a conflict with his father, because his father thought he wasn't taking things seriously, even though his son didn't know that his mother was still missing, and his stepsister and stepmother had been captured, and the severity of the situation in his hometown, and the death of the nobles in his family who we had just met earlier. And yeah, the desolation of the political structure in his hometown, all of that just like it hit him, and the conflict was eventually resolved, and they were able to move past it and build their father-son connection despite that. And the story moves on to Rudius and Eris and Rudyard rescuing his stepmother and stepsister, and to him moving up north and going to school and getting an education, growing and progressing in life, and eventually marrying his first wife, Sylphie, who he had met prior in the story when they were kids. And after that, the story moves into him rescuing his mother and the death of his father, and you see how that impacts the gravity, and you can see how close that he had gotten. And at that point, when you look back from this part of the story to before he died, you can see that contrast, you can see that relationship that he never had, those relationships that he never had, and the loss that he feels when after the death of his father. And very sad part of this story, and I teared up in that moment as well. And that was one of the moments where, you know, you get that sort of completeness in the story, the completeness of emotional reactions that, or impressions that the story invokes in its readers, and it's something I very much enjoyed. And from then on, Rudius gets married to his second wife, and then the story actually kicks off, the main conflict actually kicks off, and the true villain is revealed, and there are still some mysteries that need to be solved and some things that need to be done, and that the world just opens up from there. And Rudius marries his third wife at that point, Eris, and he has children on the way with Sophie, Roxy, and Eris, and he has to manage being a husband, a parent, a student, a adventurer, and he has to also, on top of that, protect his family from the man god. And there are some interesting tidbits of information that Rifujin introduces at that point, like Odious and the possible futures that Rudius's life could go down. And we move on from that to his acquisition of allies and new powers, and the progression of his technology, and then he begins to work under someone he feared before, that everyone feared before, and that was Dragon God Orsted. And the story progresses on from there. Rudius grows, and everyone grows around him to the point of the climax of the story, and that was where he faces off with the man god and his allies, and that battle was more like guerrilla warfare. To be honest, I think that was more of an accurate description of the events that occurred in that part of the story. It ended with some deaths and some losses, and it was a nice end to it was a nice crescendo to the conflict in Rudius' story and his conflict with the man god. And when I think about it right now, it sort of reminds me of I Am Number 4 series. I'm not sure if you guys have read that as well, but it sort of reminds me of that story, and I can't put my finger on why, but there are some moments that I can distinctly remember in both stories that kind of overlap, and they have that same feel, that similar feel to them. Now that I think about it, and then after that, the story gives you a glimpse of the end of Rudius's journey, and it's Rudius now in old age on his deathbed in his final moments, and he gets to meet his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, his children, and everyone that he's helped. They all gather there, including his and this was something that really was a gut punch when you find out that Eris was his third wife, was the first one to pass, and you see you read about the impact, and that was a very emotional moment. But he's there, and Rudius is there in his bed, and he meets his great-granddaughter Ferris, and she steals his bracelet, and he ends up giving it to her anyway, because this is his final moments, and he's just happy to see his family. And Roxy and Sophia's there, and everyone else that he's helped, they gather for his funeral, his death. And after that moment, you see he gets to meet the man god for one last time, and he looks him in the eye, and he thanks him for all that he's done. His treachery, his deception, his manipulation, because if it wasn't for the man god, Rudius wouldn't have accomplished so much. He wouldn't have the family that he would have had, who gathered around at his funeral. He wouldn't have accomplished and made history the way that he did. He wouldn't have built the community of friends and family that he had done so in his life, and then you're introduced to all the historical accomplishments that Rudius has accomplished, and you get to see his impact on the world. And after that, you're introduced to some information that makes you think how special that this story is, and how special Rudius's achievements and his influence on the world was. And that's through the information of realizing that Rudius was not actually supposed to be in that body. He was not actually supposed to be reincarnated, that it happened by chance. And that just adds so much value to the story. And that's something that I found to be very special about it. And Rudius moves from being that happy-go-lucky kid to an adventurer, to a husband, to a parent, and eventually, somehow, some way, he's become one of the 7 great powers. And throughout this journey, you get to meet a lot of interesting characters like Elise, Talahand, Ghislaine, and Riniam Persina, Ruijerd, Kalman II and Kalman III, and Dorga, and Princess Ariel, and get to know them and differentiate themselves from others and their storylines and stuff like that. And along with that, you get the moments of madness and the inside jokes that only the true followers of Mushoku Tensei will understand. The world building in Mushoku Tensei is certainly something very interesting, because it has, like I said before, the hallmarks of a fantasy story. You have the dwarves, the elves, the hobbits even, and the human race. And then you get something in addition to that. You get the angelic race, you get the demon race, you get the beast race, and I'm sure there are others as well. But what I've also enjoyed about this, and I wish it was elaborated on more, it was the conlang, and I really love conlangs of the story, and I mean, you have the beast god tongue, and the demon god tongue, and the dragon god tongue, and the anime, as well as the human god tongue and others, and the anime shows that to the best of its ability. But I don't know, I couldn't help but crave for more, and I wish there was more. And I don't think there's too many videos on YouTube. I think I've only found a few or a handful, or posts on Reddit and other social media sites. I haven't found too much information on that, but it's something that's very cool, and the dedication and the heart and the love for the work is what you can see in that those things in Rifujin's work. Another thing that I really like about this story, and Mushoku Tensei in general, and the anime and included, is the atmosphere. It feels like genuine fantasy, and in the anime it really played up to this in its own way, and through the openings and endings, and you get more of that in the first season. But the music, it was a key point in the atmosphere. The bard songs that were played, and yeah, it felt like genuine fantasy. And even with that atmosphere, that fantasy atmosphere, you get to see this isn't like a category of fantasy that I really, really enjoy, and it's interested in. As far as like the details, I don't mind the general layout of it, but that's the politics of the story, and you get to see some of that with the noble families, the Great Rat families in the two branches, and what had happened after the displacement event, and that was all due to politics and Ariel's reign. Luke's involvement. Rudius takes part in some of those politics as well, and you can see how much that bothers him, or how he has to learn to adapt to that side of the world, and you're right there with him with that adaptation and that growth. So the spin-offs of Mushoku Tensei is the continuation of the story prior to Rudius' passing, and it consists of the subjugation of the Dragon King, the redundancy chapters, jobless oblige, the old dragon's tale. I believe Roxy gets her own spin-off in the story. And you get to see more of Rudius, his family, and the gang. And it's very endearing, and you get to have many more moments of madness, and you're introduced to many other aspects of the world. And you get to see Rudius as a husband and a father when he does his best to introduce his children to the concept of Christmas and Santa Claus. And you saw how you get to read how well that goes, and you get to see Rudius's children grow up, and you get to see. I wish they had more, and I haven't got to complete all the story. So this is me talking with incomplete knowledge about the story or the spin-offs, but I wish they had more background of Lily's growth, of Lucy and stuff like that, because the stories mostly focus on Sieg and Laura, and you get a little bit of Christina and her graduation and her steps into adulthood, and who she ends up marrying in the future. And I think at that point, Lucy was already married and had a kid, and in addition to that, you also get some insight into Teresa's, Rudius's aunt, her efforts into finding a husband, and you get Rudyard's and Norin's wedding, and you get to hear about that, and it's you get to see the world progress, and yeah, that's something that I very much enjoyed, because after the end of the main story, I was very much craving for more. I was getting ready to look for like some fanfics or something like that into the world. I was hungry for more, and that's how much impact the story has had on me. This is something additional that I wanted to add to my thoughts in this discussion. And I'm very curious about Rifujin's inspirations. I don't know if you can see it in the story or if it's visible, but I get the sense that he was definitely, and this is just like a good guess or like a speculation. I think that he was probably inspired by the story of The Legend of Zelda, maybe even Lord of the Rings or others, fantasy stories of that nature. But you can kind of see those elements in there, and you can see his own spins, his own his style in the story, and how he's taken whatever inspirations that he's had and made it his, and made this lovely story.